Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 8 of building service systems. This is oh, by the way, we're just about past the halfway point. So after this week, we'll actually be over the hump and we'll be on our way on the proverbial downslope. But there's a lot more great content coming up, including this week, which I think is a really important one, something really practical for a lot of people. I mean, anyone that lives in a building, that works in a building, um, it affects you because we're going to go over HVAC fundamentals or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. This is a really, really, really big part of building service systems because this is what we're going to talk about how heating and cooling is provided to a building. This will go over things like refrigeration cycle and heat pumps and combustion and all that. And I want you to remember as you go through the content, um, the main purpose of an HVAC system is to move heat around. Remember, we just move heat. There's no such thing as cold, cold per se. There's a lack of heat. So cold air, like today, as I sit here, it's probably about 40 degrees outside. We call that cold air, but really that's just a lack of heat. And I know that sounds like I'm splitting hairs a little bit, but one of the really important things to remember um, is that that cold air outside has a lot of heat in it. Remember, we talked about the difference between heat and temperature. And so the air today, it's probably about 40 degrees outside. That's cold, but if I have a heat pump, I can actually pull enough heat from that air to sufficiently heat my house. And that's because cold air still has heat in it. It's just less heat than warm air. And so that's really important to remember. And that's kind of, HVAC systems, what they do is they're either taking heat from in the house and moving it out, or taking heat from out of the building and moving it in the building, or they're taking, a chemical energy from like a fossil fuel or maybe a biomass source, and then they, use combustion to extract that and emit heat. So really, it's all about heat. Now we do talk about air movement, and also there's some, moisture considerations as you've seen before, and dehumidification does require a lot of energy. So that's an important part of it as well. And we'll go over all of that this week and also next week when we expand to commercial HVAC systems. So this week is just a foundational lesson um, where we're going to go over just some basic concepts in HVAC from air distribution to combustion. Um, so, we have air distribution, including, return supplies and returns. So these are really great videos. Um, And then this video tells you a lot about sort of pressure basics and how that causes air to move around. There's a video here that explains how a heat pump works, which is a really interesting process. A heat pump is just a central air system that can switch flows using something called a reversing valve, and then it can heat and cool. So that's really important. We'll look at the refrigeration cycle, which is an absolutely essential thing to understand. The refrigeration cycle is how an air conditioner works, and how a window air conditioner works, and how a heat pump works, how a refrigerator works. So anything that's using electricity to cool uses the refrigeration cycle with one minor exception with evaporative cooling, which we'll go over a little bit as well, more so in the commercial uh, lesson. But we'll look at, how to properly distribute air. So all these sort of basic principles in HVAC and generally just making a building comfortable for people to be in it. And then, of course, as always, I provide some summary videos there as well. And so we'll look at again some very sort of basic aspects of HVAC before we get into the heavier content. Well, I don't know if it's heavier, but expand on that content next week when we go over commercial systems. We really dig into things like chillers and cooling towers and distribution systems that are a little more complex. So this is sort of the basic stuff. You kind of get the foundational knowledge, a good understanding of how these systems work, and then we expand it to commercial systems. And so you have overall a pretty good understanding of HVAC. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the content. It's a lot of really good stuff, really important, really practical, and things that you will use moving forward. So I hope you take the time to really dig into the material. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.